Greg DePalma and Mark Lawrence of Covers.com here on the OFN Today as we preview Week 17 of the NFL season. So, Mark, considering there are many unusual variables that take place on Week 17 Sundays over the years due to things like healthy players that are held out, with playoffs on the horizon, the old let's win one for the clapper. I mean the Gipper, excuse me.
Yes, I understand.
And of course, many more other variables. Are there any historical trends that you're aware of, one way or another, that could benefit us on Sunday?
Well, let me preface it by saying this, Greg, that last year in the Superbook contest in Las Vegas, I made a real strong run in the final 3 weeks of the contest. In fact, we went 14-1-1 the last 3 weeks, and it won the prize money for the final 3 weeks.
And that would be deservedly so.
Yes, but so too, unfortunately, did four other people. But nonetheless, it was still nice to get a piece of that pie.
Okay.
But in handicapping the final week of the season, we knew it was very, very difficult because of all of the different scenarios and everything swirling around the playoffs. The job the odds maker has to do to adjust those odds because he knows which way the public is going to go, so forth and whatnot. So what I did was I went into my database and I looked at situations that would be reliable. And when I approached the last week of the NFL season, I approached it from two facets. One, will my systems be reliable? And two, to make sure that I am not going to be playing on any team that is going to be not playing their regular players.
Okay.
Just automatic throwouts. And in fact, if you can make cases for those teams, make cases for them. Don't let the line stop you.
Sure.
You're going to have Pittsburgh and both. We're going to talk a little bit about Pittsburgh and Baltimore. You got 12 players from Baltimore that made the Pro Bowl that are all going to be watching this game with us. Mm-hmm. They're not the Baltimore Ravens. So, throw out those games where teams are going to be resting players, playoff-bound teams, and also look at these systems that have held the test of time in the final week of the season.
Yeah, that's why my top pick this week, actually my top two picks this week, happen to be the two teams that are trying to clinch playoff spots, the Eagles and the Titans. To me, I think that's the safest way for me to go. Now, I know you like the Titans, but you don't like the Eagles. You like the Cowboys. So we'll get into that a little bit later on as well. But one thing I noticed too, I wanted to find out if I could find, just looking at last year's Week 17, I looked over and tried to see if I found anything distinguishable, and I noticed that the playoff teams last year were 11-1 straight up and 8-4 against the spread. So I went, okay, well, let me see if let's see if there was something similar in 2017 and 2016. No such luck. That was an anomaly. That was something that had not happened for years at least. Now, maybe it begins a new trend. I have no idea. But it was interesting that of the 12 playoff teams, 11 of them won, and there were 11 double-digit wins on Week 17 of last year.
And in fact, for the majority of plays submitted into the Superbook contest, 95% of them I use underdogs. The final week of the season, we used four favorites, okay? And we did so because of what we're talking about here. And what you found last week was a tip of the iceberg, which is the right direction. And what I found is that NFL football teams that went to the playoffs, if they played at home in their final game of the season, this goes all the way back to 1980, they are 146-96 against the spread. That's a pretty powerful number for about 250 games. So what you're looking to do here this week is to isolate the teams that have already locked up playoff spots, put them at home, and either play on them or forget the football game. That's the rule number one about what comes out of the system book. Number two, which comes out of the system book, is a real simple logical system. And what you do is in the last game of the season, you have a division home favorite that comes in off a straight-up underdog win his previous game. So he changes roles. He pulled an upset. He changes roles. Now he's favored over a division opponent who knows him as well as anybody else. These teams are 20 and 38 against the spread
Wow.
in this particular role. And we've got two of them on the card this week. They would be the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles.
All right. And by the way, last week we also talked about how the win and cover trend. 16-0 last week, the best number of the year. You win, you cover. Well, last week it continued, 14-1. The only loser was my San Francisco 49er pick over the LA Rams, the only team to win and not cover last week. So that's a 30-1 run over the last 2 weeks. And as we always say, it sounds easier than it is, but at least it's a helpful indicator, meaning if it continues again this week, the idea is don't worry about the point spread, pick the winner.
Well, hence the big, strong double-digit favorites, and why I used them in that contest last week. A lot to do with that. Just that, because if you do win the game the final week of the season, you have numbers just like you mentioned, and you also have the other support of those particular teams being at home headed to the playoffs.
All right, let's talk about that San Francisco team taking on Seattle. My pick to win the Super Bowl, which is now not looking too good considering, I mean, it's just, wow. If you're a fan and everything is just looking so good and you got Penny going down, I still got Chris Carson and then Chris Carson and then everybody goes down. All three running backs for the most running back oriented team in the NFL goes down, so much so that Marshawn Lynch has been called off the scrap heap. Now, I have no idea if he's going to play at all in this game, and if he does, what kind of impact he's going to have. I can't imagine a whole lot, even if he does play. But this is Russell Wilson in prime time, so there's that. I am taking the Niners in this one, though. I'm going against my Seahawks. I just think it's tough when you get these two teams that are so tight and one team has already beaten the other. I think it's going to be tough for Seattle to beat San Francisco twice in the same season, in the same 6 weeks or so. We also know Seattle is not as good at home as they are on the road. We saw that again last week. Their offensive line also broke down last week. Dwayne Brown's out for a couple of weeks. He's their best offensive lineman. So you got offensive line issues, running back issues. That's everything that Seattle does on offense, and you got to take on the San Francisco team that the defense sure isn't playing as good as they played earlier in the year, and that would worry me if I'm a Niner fan.
Well, that and the running game has really dissipated for this football team as well. They were the best running team in the National Football League the first half of the season. Then they incurred some offensive injuries on the line. They opened up, spread out their attack a little bit more. So they've taken that huge bullet out of their artillery, their offensive artillery. And in fact, over the second half of the football season here, the San Francisco 49ers have really slid statistically. They're minus 59 net yards negative the second half of the season as opposed to what they were for the whole season. So San Francisco's got their own problems coming into this football game as well. And everything you talked about, all the injuries to Seattle, all the situations not playing well at home, yada, yada, yada. That's the reason they are a 3-point home underdog. They would be a 3-point favorite if everything was kosher and normal, but it's not. Now what they are is in beast mode role, having to sign Marshawn Lynch because of that. But I think this whole thing comes down to two things here, Greg. Number one, you've got a quarterback who's the best in the league in an underdog role in Russell Wilson. Okay, he's going to control this football game. Whether he has to run the ball half the time himself or put it in the hands of someone he feels can do that, or maybe even open up the passing lanes a little bit. But it will be Russell Wilson that will determine, I think, the outcome of this football game. The second is Pete Carroll has been outstanding in his career as a home underdog. He's 15-5 to the spread with Seattle. Even better yet, he's been amazing at home when he comes off a straight-up favorite loss his previous game. He's never lost to the straight up in that role. He's 11-0 straight up and 10-1 against the point spread. So those are nice numbers for Pete Carroll, for Russell Wilson. I'm going to back them in this football game here. I think the pressure is squarely on San Francisco here because they need this win and they're going to try everything they can do, if at all possible, to secure that number one seed in the bye week, number one all the way through the playoffs here. But it's strange that Seattle right now as we talk, it won't be this way when they go into the game, but right now as we talk, they could finish anywhere with the number 1, 2, 3, or 5 seed. Seattle can. So there's a lot of variables in this football game, but when push comes to shove, my money will be on Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and look, that's why my money is still going to be on Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson when the playoffs begin. And I actually don't know whether or not this is that big of a deal for Seattle if they were to lose and still win or get to the Super Bowl. I'm more interested to see how they play, how especially with Brown out, because Brown could return in a week or two, and Lynch, if he is going to be a part of this offense for real, he'll need at least, you would think, a game to kind of get his juices going. So I would just want to see. I don't care about San Francisco if I'm obviously from their perspective, because they're no matter how Seattle plays or the result of the game, I should say, I'm just really concerned with how Seattle plays. So let's put it this way, I'd rather them play good and lose than play bad and win. I think it's important because I'm confident Seattle. They've already proved it this year. I'm confident Seattle can go on the road as a 5 seed to begin the postseason and still make a run to win the Super Bowl, to get to the Super Bowl, whereas being at home, again, which has normally been such a big asset for them, not so much this season, 2-4-1 against the spread at home. So we'll see how that works out. I also think San Francisco may be the reason why the running game hasn't been going too well. Maybe teams are starting to realize, let's just stop that running game because we don't believe Jimmy Garoppolo can beat us.
That could well be the case. Put it all on Garoppolo and don't let the running game pound it down our throats. Keep our defense on the field. So, it's a better game plan for the opponents if they can force a passing game from San Francisco. And one final thought from me, as far as Seattle is concerned in the playoffs. When they make it to the playoffs, they are absolutely going to need a healthy Jadeveon Clowney on the defensive side of the football.
Yes, that's why I wonder if he plays in this game, because we all know it's more important. Hey, a better seed and all that and winning the division, that's important. But realistically, if Seattle, even if they win, I don't think they're going to get a bye. I think the most likely spot for them if they win is the 3 seed, and if they lose, the 5 seed. So I think if Clowney isn't anywhere near healthy the way Pete Carroll wants him, I say sit him.
Well, it's like I said when I wrote the game up in our playbook newsletter here, you need a Philadelphia lawyer to figure out what possible seeds Seattle can fall into because there are so many this particular week. But if I'm Pete Carroll and I'm in the locker room, they're going to know, first of all, what their situation is because of what happened earlier.
Yep.
But if I'm Pete Carroll, I have my football team focused on one thing, this game. Not where they're going to finish, where they could finish, what they could have done, so forth. Focus on San Francisco in this football game. And I think you're going to see just that in this contest Sunday night.
All right, let's go to the Eagles and the Giants. And this is a game, as I mentioned, that I'm just going with the Eagles as my top pick of the week. You're taking the Giants in this one. Look, I went back and forth. My initial reaction was, okay, remember we talked about it last week, that I could see the Eagles, if they beat the Cowboys, they can come back this week and lose to the Giants. So it would not shock me in the least if that happened. But I'm just going to go ahead. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that a couple of years ago, as the Eagles were about to make their run, I kind of sided their way throughout the postseason in the Super Bowl. I liked them in that kind of role. They really did a great job in the underdog role, even though they're not an underdog this week. But still, nobody expects them to win the Super Bowl. The very interesting point, too, is besides the quarterback, they had some key injuries when they won the Super Bowl. So it wasn't just the quarterback.
Right.
So they know how to win when they have key players down. Giants, and you noted it at the Playbook newsletter this week, that Daniel Jones, not very good at home this season compared to his road stats. And that, I think, is helpful when I'm trying to believe whether or not Daniel Jones will be pumped up more or have a little bit more of an ability to win because he's at home. Well, the numbers tell you that's not the case. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Eagles, who are 10-2 straight up, 9-3 against the spread in their last 12 at New York.
Well, I took the Eagles also, Greg, to win the football game but not get the money. And one of the reasons was because of the opening stat that we discussed about teams that win straight up as an underdog and now are favored in a season ending division game. That works against Philadelphia here. More critically, their injury situation. They're really, really banged up. It looks like they're going to lose Zach Ertz as well. He fractured his rib in that football game. But I think what makes them viable as a winner in this football contest are two things. Number one, Doug Peterson. He's been there before. He's done it, and he'll have his football team prepared. He was a master last week. Number two, you mentioned Daniel Jones and his home road dichotomy, and it is startling. At home, he's got a QB rating of 69.9. On the road, his QB rating is 104.7. 18 of his 23 touchdowns have come on the road this year, and 8 of his 11 interceptions have come at home. So if Philadelphia can keep him on par with that, I think they're going to win this football game and end up winning the NFC East.
Yeah, Giants are 10-1 against the spread in their last 11 games as a dog after they won a road game straight up. So that would favor the Giants there. The Eagles have beaten the Giants 6 straight times, but the Giants have covered 3 out of those 6. And, of course, the Week 14 overtime win by the Eagles, that changed everything. I mean, it's just incredible. At halftime of that game, it looked like the Eagles' season was done. The Eagles come back, go to overtime, win the coin toss, score a touchdown, and now they're in the driver's seat for a division title. So,
yeah, well,
crazy.
good for them. That's Doug Peterson, and that's what the Philadelphia Eagles are. That's the one nice thing about them. When they do fall behind, there's no panic in this football team. They're going to get the job done. Now, if they make the playoffs, you're going to probably have Deshaun Jackson back in this lineup. It's going to really help the offense as well, and you get a healthy, what would likely be a healthy Jordan Howard in the backfield as well. So they could have the look of a different team should they make the playoffs.
And Lane Johnson, they got to get him back too. So
exactly.
Maybe Ertz, if he takes the week off, will be healthy for the postseason too. So yeah, that when I look ahead, and let's just say Seattle loses and they're the 5 seed, well, there's your matchup, the first round, and that's a tough one because the Eagles play well and don't win ugly. I think that Seattle, especially being a banged-up team, that's all of a sudden that could be an Eagle win, which I never would have thought just a couple of weeks ago with that type of matchup.
Correct. I agree with that 100%.
All right, let's go to the other game, the other key game in that division, and it seems like we're going back and forth for the Clapper, against the Clapper. But you're dominating me in this back and forth, and you're going to try to make it a clean 3 straight because you're taking the Clapper when I'm not taking the Clapper. There's just a lot of things against the Cowboys trend-wise that I've noticed in this one. There are a few things that you're going to bring up that do say take Cowboys, but I look here. The Cowboys are 3-23-1 at home, following a straight-up conference loss since 2009, including 1-19 against the spread as a favorite. And, of course, I took that out of the magazine, the Playbook.com magazine. The Cowboys are 0-10 against the spread in their last 10 as a home favorite, following a straight-up division loss. The Cowboys are 0-6 against the spread in their last 6 home finales when they are a losing team. The Cowboys are 0-8 against the spread in their last 8 after a loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. Wow. I mean, that's a lot. And I like the Redskins anyway in this game, so that helped me to go, you know what? I'm thinking of even taking the money line in this one because it's almost 4-1, and I can completely see the Clapper going down because he's done anyway. So he'll go down with the ship and lose in the most ridiculous way possible to the Redskins at home. But I think it might be just as safe to maybe up the money on the game for my sake and just take the Redskins in the 11.
Let me paint the worst scenario here, Greg. Dallas wins, Philadelphia loses, Dallas makes the playoffs. We have another year of the Clapper in Dallas.
Oh, that'd be good.
Jerry Jones will not fire him.
Oh, imagine Cowboy fans, the debate that they have to be saying to themselves this week, that inner debate of that potential scenario taking
Yep,
place.
exactly.
Would
But
I
you know,
rather be in the
right.
playoffs or get rid of the clapper? I bet you 95% of it would say, let's just get out of here and go fishing.
Yeah, let's take a seat this week. Yeah, and we'll revisit this next year. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably so. But the reason that I got to Dallas in the newsletter is this, and like I said, it goes against every grain of fiber in my body to do that. To have to lay points with him, lay double digits with him, it's a throw up. And what it does basically for me is it keeps me out of betting the underdog. And what we opened up with, and again here, these home teams have done extremely well in the last week of the National Football League season. Now, Dallas is not certainly a playoff team, but if they make the playoffs, they'll end up falling into that number. So that possibility does exist there. And you've got Washington, a losing team on the road, coming off a loss, their last game of the season. These guys usually have their golf clubs packed. They're just 32 and 44 against the spread overall since 1980. And when they're taking on losing teams like they are, they're just 6 and 17. So bad numbers against Washington in this contest as well. We'll find out whether or not this football team really wants Jason Garrett on the sidelines or not. The other part we haven't even talked about is the health status of Dak Prescott here. If he's not 100%, we could be watching the last remnants of the Clapper in action.
Yeah, that was just killing me taking the Cowboys last week and watch. Not only his throws that were off, but then the drop passes, and then Elliott. Now, here's the thing: Elliott takes himself out of the game. Okay, I got a couple of problems with this. Not that he took himself out of the game, because we find out, okay, he got banged up, he needed a minute to regroup. Okay, fine. That's okay. I understand that. Two things could have been done here if you're the Cowboys and you're a smart coaching staff. Number one, call time out, you lunatic. It is one of the biggest plays of the game. You want your best player out there. Give him a minute to regroup, to get that dizziness out of his head, and make sure he's on the field. Or at least, then number two, the play call. I have seen that call by this Cowboy team about 3 or 4 times this year. And I haven't watched every play of them this year, so maybe they've called it a few times and been successful. But every single time they've called that play that I've watched them, they've lost about 3 or 4 yards. It's a college play. It's ridiculous, and you do it with a rookie running back in the most important time of the game.
Well, if you saw it, so too you can rest assured that so too the other defensive coordinators see that as well. And that could be a big reason why they lose so many yards in that play is because they know it's in their playbook. It's probably coming, and they're ready to stop the play. So, it all goes into the Clappers coaching portfolio and some of the reasons why he should not be in the NFL next year.
By the way, NFL double-digit home finales are 25-0 straight up. And I looked at that and I said, okay, if this was any other game, then I definitely wouldn't take Washington to upset and go 25-1. But hey, you know what? If there's any coach that could break that streak, it's the Clapper. So maybe 25-1 could happen, and the Redskins can pull off the upset. And you know what? The Redskins, if I'm taking the Redskins, I'd rather actually have Case Keenum than Haskins in this spot.
Well, I would too, for the experience, no question about it. And Haskins is learning on the job, and he'll probably find ways to lose games
Yeah.
rather than win them. So, I would agree with that. I would agree with that assessment.
Speaking of agreeing, let's go to the game we agree on, and that is Tennessee. This will be my 4-star of the week. And again, another situation where I know at least in this crazy week that I've got a team that desperately wants to win. And they're going up against the team, no matter what they say. I really feel, especially if Tennessee's got a lead, I think, just like in Buffalo and maybe another place or two, I think you're going to see by the second half, some of these starters will be rested. I've seen it before. You're not going to risk Sean Watson or DeAndre Hopkins and those guys, especially, let's just say, the first series, and somebody lays a hit on Hopkins or Watson, and it's just a hit. that might be ding, 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 ding. Okay, I think that's a signal for me to get these guys off the field. So I don't think they're going to play the whole game. They're not going to be emotionally invested in the game like Tennessee will. And let's not forget, if you take away that big interception that Tennessee had against them against Houston a couple of weeks ago, a 14-point swing, Tennessee might have won that football game. So I'm taking Tennessee, and even with Henry back, that helps as well. But I feel pretty good about knowing that I've got a team this week that desperately needs this win and is just as talented as the team they're playing.
They are. We're paying a price for it, though. We're being favored in this football game. But
True.
I'm going to lay the points in this contest here as well. I can't believe for the life of me the National Football League scheduled Kansas City to start at 1 o'clock Eastern, and this game starts at 4:25 because of the importance of the Kansas City game as far as Houston's playoff seeding is concerned. If Kansas City wins the game, Houston comes dead to this football game. Their chances of moving up in the playoff seeding go out the window with the Kansas City win. And that opens the door for Tennessee in the contest here. And you're going to likely see an inspired effort by Tennessee and a flat effort by Houston, and which all leads me to believe that if you like Tennessee, you better bet them now because this line will be adjusted accordingly going into that football game. If Kansas City's got a big lead or looks like they're going to win or they are winning, this spread's going to maybe double before the start of the football game because of Houston coming flat in the contest. The reasons I'm liking Tennessee in the game, though, is the fact that, number one, this is part of one of these real nice angles that I have of teams that are division teams that are meeting for the second time in 3 weeks. As you mentioned here, in that game that they played before in the contest here, they could have very, very well turned the other way in the game. Now Tennessee comes in here with a loss, with revenge, and a right back within 3-week revenge rematch. Teams in that role are 14-5 against the spread. That's a pretty nice number favoring Tennessee in this contest. And you've also got Ryan Tannehill in a real nice role in his career as a quarterback in the NFL. When he's off a loss and the other team's off a win, and the loss that he's off of is by no more than 10 points, he's 9-3 to the spread in that particular situation. So you put this all together here. If I can get Derrick Henry healthy on the field for the Titans, I think they're going to win this football game comfortably.
And Houston's only 2-5 against the spread at home this year too.
Yes, they're struggling. They're like a Seattle at home this year. Yes.
All right, now let's go with some big games that have seeding implications, all double-digit spreads, and two of these games we're going to disagree on. We're both taking the Patriots, but I'm taking the Packers and the Saints. So I'm taking all three of the favorites. The way I look at it is I'm going to take all three, and if I get 2 out of the 3, I'm ahead. You're going to take the Panthers and the Lions as the 2 dogs, and I can completely understand all the reasons that you're going to explain about why to take them. I'm going with the Packers and Carolina more and New Orleans more because I'm looking straight ahead and I'm going. You got Blau at quarterback for Detroit with all the other injuries Detroit's dealing with, and you've got Will Greer in his second start, and he didn't look too good last week, and this whole organization has just been. They haven't shown anything since Ron Rivera has been fired. And both Green Bay and New Orleans need wins for seeding purposes. So that's kind of the reason why I'm going. I'm kind of disregarding a lot of the trends and stats that you're going to bring up. I'm kind of just going with I've got Blau and Greer, and I'm going against them both.
Well, if you're going to disregard them, I won't bring them up, Greg.
No.
But, some of the reasons that I'm looking at Green Bay as we open up the show with that ugly stat, winning as a dog, now being a division favorite last game of the year. That's Green Bay Packers here. Aaron Rodgers himself has also been surprisingly a struggle on the road when coming off a road win. In the last 5 years, he's 0-7 straight up with only 1-point spread cover in that particular role. So not the best of role here for Aaron Rodgers in the situation here. Now, I realize you have to put a clothespin over your nose to play the Detroit Lions because they're really, really ugly coming in here. But they're on a 5-game losing streak. And whenever Detroit's been on a 5-game losing streak, they're 5-0 to the spread when they take on a 500 or better division opponent. So I'm going to play the percentages and grind it out with Detroit in this football game. That'll be my side in the contest.
That's a minimum of 5 game losing streak.
Yes, it is.
Okay, because yeah,
Five,
Detroit.
five losses in their last five. Yes.
Okay, yeah, Detroit has lost 8 straight and 11 of 12. They're 1-9 against the spread in their last 10. But here's another thing that I'd be concerned with the Packers too, is their win this year against the Lions was prevented a 5th straight loss to Detroit. That was that game on prime time that Detroit got the shaft from the officials in that game. So the Lions have now covered 5 straight games against the Packers. So we'll keep that in mind, too. One good thing for the Packers, they have won and covered 5 straight following a Monday Night Football game. Now, for the Saints, I will look at a trend from Playbook.com magazine that I like. They got a really successful record, ATS record, following consecutive straight up and against the spread wins. So it's a very big number that favors the Saints into that trend. They're also 6-0 straight up ATS on the road in their last 6 this year. But kind of like Green Bay, even though they've beaten Carolina 3 out of 4, they have dropped 4 straight covers to the Panthers.
Yeah, there's some history going back and forth inside this series. One of which is Carolina, when they're at home and they scored 7 or fewer points, or fewer than 7 points their last game. They're 8-0 to the spread running that way. So you hold me down once, it's going to be tough to hold me down twice. The other side is you're talking about a New Orleans football team that is really not comfortable laying these kind of points. As a favorite of 13 or more points against losing opponents, they're just 1-7 against the spread. So this is kind of taking New Orleans out of their role, if you will, putting Carolina in their role. Yes, New Orleans is going to win this football game. You know it, I know it, and everybody else knows it. But I'm going to play the percentages here and grind it out once again with Carolina here. It's just 2 favorites, I think, in New Orleans and Green Bay that I really would feel more uncomfortable laying the points than I would taking them with the dog.
All right, Green Bay, a win and a Seattle win, and they will be the number 1 seed. They clinch a number 2 seed with a win. Saints need a win, a Green Bay loss, or a San Francisco loss for a number 2 seed bye, which could happen. More, of course, likely Seattle beating San Francisco. Now let's talk about the big spread out of the 3 that we agree on, and that is New England against Miami. 16, the spread seems to be it seems to be going higher and higher every day. Of course, they beat the Dolphins 43-0 as an 18-point favorite way earlier this season, where the Dolphins were the most pathetic September team in the history of sports. Patriots are 10-1 straight up and against the spread in home finales. They clinch a bye with a win. I wouldn't touch this game if it wasn't for that important note that they need a bye to win. They need a win to get a bye. We all know how important that is. They don't want to be taking this game into the 4th quarter in a close situation at all. I think they know how important the bye is, so they're going to be trying to pound the Dolphins early and often, and they'll hope to clinch that bye by halftime.
Well, what you've got in this football game, Greg, is a little bit surprising. I don't think most people realize this, but when New England pounded Miami down here in Miami 43-0 the first time they played, they were actually favored by more in Miami than they are at home this week. And that's with the line being packed by the odds maker because of the fact that New England needs this victory. So, if they don't need the victory, they're coming in here as a 13-point favorite. So they're actually laying less this week than they did at Miami. So a little bit of value to New England in that sense. I know for a fact that this Miami football team is just tattered with injuries. They're signing players from who knows where just to fill roster spots. I think they're down to like their 5th or 6th running back. Their secondary is pathetic. I mean, it's absolutely down to nothing, bare bones nothing. And they're just waiting for the season to end here. Miami is. Now, you got New England coming in here. As you said, no way in the world do they want anything other than a number 2 seed to have a bye to get ready for the football playoffs, because that's where they're at their best. And Tom Brady's pretty good in his last home game for New England, 10-1 straight up and against the spread. While I'm uncomfortable laying big points like this, there's no way I would touch Miami. I can only look at New England.
Yeah, because Miami definitely has been playing better. You got Flores coming back home. You would think that the players will want to fight hard for their coach. He's done a really good job under the circumstances there. I think they've got the right guy, at least for now. It looks like that. Now they got to make sure they got the right GM and all that other stuff, which I think has been an issue for them in the past, as far as talent evaluation and so forth. But it's tough, especially that crazy win last week had to take a little bit of something out of them. And they got to go on the road, and I don't know where the weather is up there, up in Foxborough, but I know it's been kind of warm lately. I wonder if it's going to be, average temperatures, or I haven't even looked at the weather to see if that would come into play.
Well, I know the Midwest and parts going east are going to be very icy and cold. So now whether that runs as far as Boston remains to be seen, but we'll keep an eye on the weather map nonetheless. But you mentioned Brian Flores taking on his former team. If you take a look at the end of the football season, when he looks at his body of work against his former team, he knows going into this game he's minus 43 points because he got blanked 43
Yeah.
to nothing. So, maybe he can do a better job than that, but I don't think he can stay inside of 20 points in this contest.
Yeah, I mean, if he cuts that in half, the Patriots still cover.
Yes, they do. Yes,
So
they do.
that'll work. Okay, now the last two games, Pittsburgh at Baltimore and Oakland at Denver, have, of course, important ramifications for the playoffs depending on how the other teams fare. Pittsburgh, if Tennessee loses, Pittsburgh can get into the playoffs with a win. They've won 10 straight season finales, so that's working for them. But look, as a Jet fan, I saw what happened up close. And with Hodges under center, there ain't no Mason Rudolph to rescue him. With Hodges under center, I know you're taking the Steelers, but I can't do it. I mean, I know the Ravens are sitting 12 Pro Bowlers, which I just think the Ravens with 12 Pro Bowlers is ridiculous anyway. But whatever. I mean, RG3 is better than Hodges. It's still a rivalry. The Ravens know they can maybe have a play in knocking the Steelers out. So I think there'll still be enough talent to overcome Mr. Duck Hodges. And if he plays more like the guy that played his first couple of games, then yeah, okay. But boy, this kid's confidence is shot, and I'm not seeing it.
Well, I do know this. He is going to be the answer to a trivia question in about 5 years. Like, who was that quarterback for Pittsburgh when they had to go to their third string quarterback to try and make the playoffs? What was his name? So a lot of people aren't going to remember it because he hasn't put on any kind of a performance that's noteworthy or memorable, if you will. He kind of snuck into the league. Nobody had any film on him in his first game or two, but they've got it on him now, so he's going to have to perform in this contest here. This is going to be more preparation for Pittsburgh and their defense if they're going to get this job done here, and also Baltimore's lack of attention in the football game. I don't know if the Baltimore reserves are better than the Pittsburgh starters that are looking to play and secure a playoff spot. I think that would be a stretch to assume something like that. And you're also taking a look here at Mike Tomlin, who has this playoff experience in a situation just like this. You mentioned 10 straight wins in their final game of the season here. The stat that really blew my mind away was, and it won't apply here, but the Baltimore Ravens in red zone, when they reached the red zone this year, 61 times, they scored 57 times in their 61 tries in the red zone. The only 4 times they didn't, they kneeled down. That's an amazing stat, okay? And that's worth keeping in mind when the playoffs come here, especially if you're doing some in-game wagering.
All right, and then the last game, I can't even believe, but this kind of actually has happened over the last several years in the AFC. When the Bills got in a few years ago, when the Dolphins got in a few years ago, Bengals. You get some of these teams that get into the postseason as a 6th seed that are. I mean, look, we're seeing it with the NFC East this year. That you're like, I mean, really? I mean, how does this team get? How are the Oakland Raiders? People can say all they want about, there's just too many things that have to go right for the Raiders to get in. I'm sorry, but that's not it. If Pittsburgh loses, which is possible, I mean, hey, if Houston beats Tennessee, that's possible. And then the only other thing Oakland needs is for Indianapolis to beat Jacksonville. That's it.
Was they're supposed to do.
Yeah,
exactly.
and if New England beats the Dolphins, that's it. And then the Raiders, of course, have to take care of business. So there's a lot of things that have to happen, but it's not as crazy as it could have been. So I see why you're leaning towards the Raiders in this one, and I took the Raiders last week against the Chargers, one of my very few upset wins in a while in the NFL. But a couple of things of note from John Gruden in the Playbook magazine. Gruden is 0-8 against the spread away following a straight-up division dog win. And Gruden is 0-11 straight up and against the spread away when his team has a losing record following a straight-up win. So the 0-8, 0-11. I mean, that's 0-4s. So I just also think Oakland. I commend Gruden and his staff for the job they've done to put them in this spot with all of the injuries that they've had, and not having the right quarterback. He's got to get a new quarterback. I don't think there's any question about that. You can't go to Las Vegas and sell everything on Derek Carr. He's just a very unsexy guy. His 70% completion percentage he seems to throw every time he's in a football game, and then you look up and he's got like 50 yards and no touchdowns. I don't understand any of that. So I think they got to get a dynamic quarterback, and with all those draft picks, I'm confident that they will. But, hey, you got to hand it to Fangio to keep this Denver team going, especially Drew Lock. I'm actually surprised that Lock has been as good as he has been after only a few games in his career.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit surprised here too, because the reports I was hearing weren't very promising with him. He didn't throw the ball with any touch at all. He kind of wants to rifle everything that he throws. But maybe sitting on the bench was the best thing that happened to him, to kind of get a feel for the game. So, tip of the hat to them. They may not even have to draft a quarterback this year, the Denver Broncos.
Agreed.
If Locke could be their guy, especially if he holds up well in this particular football game. But I'm a little bit surprised that the odds makers installed Oakland as the underdog in this contest. One, because they are alive for the playoffs and Denver is not. And as you mentioned here, those four scenarios that they need are all doable. There would be no surprise at all if any of them happened here. But they will also know going into this contest whether or not they're alive. Did Tennessee lose? Did Pittsburgh lose? Did the Colts win? If none of those things happen, they're going to be dead and flat for the football game. So I think what happens here is the odds maker hedges and he installs Denver as the favorite, figuring that the likelihood of any one of those three possibilities is probably going to happen.
And we don't even know the health status of Jacobs, the rookies had a tremendous season for the Raiders. Ty Williams is banged up, and Trayvon Mullen. I can't even believe that there's a chance for him to play this week after the injury he sustained last week. Another player in that secondary. They have lost a ton of kids in that secondary, and he's the latest one. I got to tell you, they're a healthy team with all the extra draft picks they have this year. If they could find the right quarterback, this is the playoff team next year.
Well, they could well be a playoff team next year. And they're going to love doing it. You're talking about Oakland making this move. Yeah, making the move to Vegas. They're going to end up liking what they're seeing in Vegas. So, and he's got all these draft picks stocked up, from the Khalil Mack trade. So, things are looking up for Oakland right now. You can't convince people that live in Oakland that, but as far as the Raiders go, there's some promising days ahead for this football team.
All right, Mark, appreciate it as always. How's everything going on at Playbook and Covers?
Everything's going real well at both sites, Greg. At covers.com, all my selection plays are available. At Playbook, if you want to download our bowl stat report, there's still plenty of college football bowl games left. A lot of great data, stats, and information there. And, of course, put your hands on the weekly Playbook football newsletter at playbook.com.
Mark, appreciate it. We'll talk playoff football next week.
That sounds great, Greg. Be good. Have a good week off, and I'll catch you then.